You know, it is amazing to me that the author of that Deuteronomy passage that we heard so well proclaimed, thank you so much, in that very first reading, it's amazing that it seems to encourage the people to look back on their desert wanderings as a period that was worth remembering, even cherishing. That's almost, to me, that's almost like selective memory, because those 40 years in the desert, those were times of extreme hardship and temptation and physical exhaustion and despair, death, failure, and rebellion against both God and Moses. It got so bad that the people turned in anger against Moses, and they wondered why he even brought them out of Egypt. They would prefer, they told him, to return to those good old days of slavery, which they knew, rather than face their very difficult present time and a very uncertain and maybe deadly future. I have discovered that the journey out of slavery of any kind, egoism, addiction, indifference, sin, anger, materialism, war, they are painful, slow, and tedious journeys. It is desert labor. And who among us hasn't traveled through one desert or another in our own lifetimes? Times of spiritual emptiness, times of a long illness, the death of a loved one, the onslaught of a sudden illness that throws our lives into chaos, the struggles to make a marriage work, and the despair as we watch our children make decisions that we don't think are really good for them. And the frustration and sadness that we feel as we watch people and nations in the chaos of war. And the trials of our church, desperately trying to be in recovery. As we hope to cope with some kind of concept of networking 10 different and unique churches into one loving and worshiping community. Nobody has to tell us to remember the deserts of our lives. I'd rather forget them. But that's not what Deuteronomy tells us to do. The people are told not to merely remember the hard times that they went through for those 40 years, but to remember how God was with them each step of the way in that desert. Israel was to remember not only the afflictions they experienced during their wanderings, but how they came to know God's constant care and love for them. When they were pushed to their breaking point, God provided them water from a rock of all places. When they were hungry, God gave them bread, manna, every single day. And each day they were invited to trust that God would provide for them. And every day he did. That's what the author of Deuteronomy wants the people to remember. That they are not on their own in distress, whether it's past or present, but that God is with us each step of the way. In today's liturgy, God once again gives us the word to hear and ponder, so that we don't get lost in our many contemporary desert places. And then after we've fed on the Word of God, St. John, in his gospel, reminds us that we right now are fed living bread that has come down to us through heaven. In Jesus' culture, flesh and blood referred to the whole person. So when Jesus is speaking to us about eating and drinking, he is inviting his hearers to join in a personal communion with him. Not only with him, but with the Father who sent him. And this communion with Jesus gives us life right now in union with him. And it is also his pledge of life to us and for us after we die. Each time that we come forward to receive Jesus' Eucharistic body, we are expressing our desire to take Jesus fully into our bodies, to take him fully into our lives. And then, once we take him in, then we take him out into the community. We all become living tabernacles. And so, we are asking that our lives then become reflections of our compassionate and loving and forgiving God. We all share equally in today's banquet. The meal is simple, but it is more than enough for the hungering spirits. Nobody gets preferential treatment. This communion that we're going to share makes us all one. It is a start to unite us in worship with all of our brothers and sisters throughout this entire county. There will be no favorites, no privileged, no insiders, no outsiders, not in this community or not around this table. We all eat the same food. That's why we call it Holy Communion. It is the community celebrating the Holy One who is in our midst, who is making us one in his own life by sharing with us his own very body. And if we share in this Eucharist today, doesn't that really mean that we are committing ourselves to the very meaning of the Eucharist? That's why we need to keep answering the invitation to come forward every single week and receive the one who has given himself to us. Why? So that we can give ourselves to others. Partaking of his body in communion gives us a share in his glorious life, gives us a share into his ministry. It gives us a share into his sacrificial death. And most importantly, it moves us to give up our own lives for the well-being of others.